Phase 3 now, Obamacare Phase 2 is scheduled to get underway later this week. Like it or not, want it or not. Open enrollment for Obamacare begins on November 15. That's about a month later than last year. It was delayed, of course, until after the elections to help Democrats. Obviously didn't work. Meantime, in Indiana, some 30,000 residents have gotten bad news. Compliments of Obamacare. Anthem is not allowed to offer the same policies as last year. Why? They no longer meet proper government Obamacare guidelines.
All new policies sold must include 10 essential benefits like maternity coverage and pediatric dental care. Tonight, our investigators asked the question on a lot of people's minds: can you appeal this decision?
Unfortunately, that's not an option. These are people that will have to purchase a plan that, again, is compliant with the Affordable Care Act. The letters that have been sent out do detail the options that people have.
Welcome to the club, the Obamacare Scorched Earth Club. Now, let's go back 1 year ago. One of the architects of Obamacare, MIT professor Jonathan Gruber, he and everybody else on Team Obama knew this law is a mess.
This bill was written in a tortured way to make sure CBO did not score the mandate as taxes. If CBO scored the mandate as taxes, the bill dies. Okay, so it's written to do that. In terms of risk-rated subsidies, if you had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in, it made explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money, it would not have passed.
There you go. It's a travesty. This guy should be held accountable, along with the president and everybody else. This as the White House scrambles, once again, to make sure the Obamacare website is ready and working. Sound familiar? Also sounding familiar, this. Another Supreme Court challenge for Obamacare. Joining me now from our bureau in Washington, D.C., president of the Market Institute and Daily Ledger contributor Charlie Sauer. Charlie, I was listening to mostly radio reports talking about this latest challenge to Obamacare, and it said, hey, the bulletin was, it's a challenge to the Obamacare subsidies. That's really only part of the picture. It's a challenge to the Obamacare subsidies as it pertains to the federal Obamacare exchange, because that's not how the law is written.
Yeah, and it's a challenge to the IRS making up their own laws and actually providing subsidies or taxpayer money, my money and your money, to provide the subsidies to people that weren't written to get them in the law. Now, Professor Gruber, who in your video, by the way, that was taken down by Penn earlier today because of its recent fame and only restored because of the internet outroar that it faced afterwards. But Jonathan Gruber has also been videoed talking about how the bill was written. He's one of the architects of Obamacare, in saying how these subsidies were actually incentives for the states to create the exchanges. And not only was he wrong, but 34 states believed he was wrong. So 34 states have these subsidies, and that's what this court case is. 34 states use the federal exchange, and that's what the court case is about. That is currently 4 million people. It looks to be 7.5 million by 2016, and we're talking about $36 billion in exchanges. It's a lot of money and a lot of people, and it's the Obama administration that's looking to sucker these people into the exchange, force them to buy insurance, and now is going to turn around and these people are going to have to pay their subsidy back.
And just to be clear, in summary, the wording basically says that the exchanges, the state exchanges, can issue subsidies. It says nothing about a federal exchange, which, of course, is the majority of how people can get Obamacare, correct?
Correct. The Affordable Care Act basically says that if you have a state exchange, you can offer the subsidies, or the IRS can offer the subsidies to you. It says nothing about the federal exchange or how it's done. And in part, there's really not that many people that the Supreme Court granting cert on this case is really a surprise. There's not that many groups still involved. Michael Cannon of the Cato Institute needs to be applauded. Also, the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons for their amicus brief. And I point them out because their amicus in particular points out the point that you just made. The IRS was not given the right under the bill to provide any exchanges through the federal exchange. They were only provided the ability to do it through the state exchanges. And that was the whole incentive that Democrats believed would force states to create the state exchanges. What are they getting wrong here? A state is not a market. Governments don't follow the same incentives that people follow, and they didn't. They were looking for the long-term best interest of the constituents of their state.
And you know, this really goes to what we've been hammering for months now, I guess over a year, that the Obama administration has taken this monstrosity of a bill that was originally 2,000 pages, and I believe has added some 50,000 pages of regulations, and has essentially rewritten the bill. And this is the residue of it. But now when you go back to what you were talking about, the 16 exchanges, the state exchanges, I believe, including District of Columbia, that number is dwindling. Oregon is out. They're using the federal exchange now, and I believe Massachusetts has joined them, and I think there's maybe 4 or 5, including Hawaii, Nevada, and a couple others that may be dropping their state exchanges. So this really puts the onus on this decision. You know, this decision could essentially shut down Obamacare the way it is.
It all comes back to Professor Gruber in his comments. The administration needed the language written the way that it was and as shady as it was to pass the bill. If they would have had the federal government take over health care, they couldn't have done it. So they had to narrow it down to the states. So the thought was, if you use the states, if you incentivize the states by providing this subsidy, then they would actually create the exchanges. And so we see the states failing to be able to make the exchanges. We see states failing to even make the website to advertise the exchange, and it's just a failure all around. So if this case goes through, the Supreme Court grants cert to reverse. They don't grant cert to approve of the ruling, and that's the Fourth Circuit said that the IRS should be able to provide these subsidies. And in this case, the Supreme Court, we believe, is granting cert to reverse that ruling. And so we think that changes the complete course of the law. If people can't get subsidies, they can't pay for the higher price of insurance under Obamacare. Less people have insurance, and the people that still have it have it at a higher price. Bad all around. This case is great. I'm glad the Supreme Court granted cert.
87% of the people on Obamacare are receiving subsidies. It just simply won't work. Charlie, thanks.